Well, just to thank you and for coming, and to thank Frank and Erica and Sherry and all who helped make this possible, and particularly to everyone who's with us and those who are with us online, Zoom. The fact that I'm starting on Tudors may surprise you, but this is just a sort of temptation to get you excited about 2026, because we are going to launch into the whole topic for the winter term, which is Tudors. But when you think about history, it doesn't always separate out into eras like we want it to, because I always like to think about the Tudors as being 16th century, but you know yourselves that is 1485, 15th. But what's 15 years among friends, right? I mean, it's close enough, close enough. So we'll start on the Tudors, and I think this is important because sometimes, like Frank was just talking about Henry VIII and Elizabeth, and then I always think, is that really fair? I mean, when you think of the other Tudors, I mean, I know you don't mean anything ugly about that, because St. Frank is a pious and wonderful person. So we understand that he didn't mean any harm, but there was something inside when he said that hurt me a little bit.
Yeah, I neglected a few.
Okay, but they're important to me. And all of us from History World are a little bit hurt when we don't mention Henry VII. I mean, how often do you go by Bosworth Field and think, but for Henry VII, none of this would have been possible?
Yeah.
And so that's where we start. And of course, we understand it starts with marriage. And you think I'm going to do something sentimental and loving, and I'm not, because if we have talked about one thing this term, it's about arranged marriages. And that is part of the political world for centuries to come. It's not just medieval, it goes on into modern times, I dare say. The fact is, however, that there does seem to be a love match in the fact that now Henry, who will be the first Tudor, is going to marry someone of the other political persuasion. And so that's why we have the famous combination roses, Lancastrians and Tudor. And it's very interesting to me to think about the fact that once they were married, boy, she took his side. And a lot of Yorkists are going down. And it's like, I'm so sad, cousin this, or, you said, no, I think she was over it. Once she settled into marriage, she was all about the Tudor cause. And we're going to see many examples of that. Because, of course, Elizabeth of York, and she would have 4 children by him. And as far as I know, and those who love any kind of, history about people cheating or running around or love on the side or any, Henry VII is all about marital fidelity. I'm sorry, that's just the way it was. So that's Elizabeth of York. And it doesn't mean, however, that he was a man of pacifism. or that he did not have a certain amount of what I would call paranoia about getting hit. That is to say, oh, I don't know how the mafia would say this, to have off them,
Off.
to slay them in a way that would be hurtful. Yeah. I think we understand that there were various plots against Henry VII, and you can understand why. You all will remember Wars of the Roses. Who could forget that? I mean, it's just gotten over. And there are people who were hurt in there, or their feelings were hurt, and that means they want to hurt you. It's just normal. So what do we need to do? Well, we need to get them before they get us. So we're going to run into some interesting situations. So if you want to say, oh, you're perfectly right to do so. This little fella had been in the lockup since he was 10. You say, well, what did the little tyke do? Nothing, but it was his DNA. That will often get you into trouble. Edward Plantagenet, Earl of Warwick. And who was his father? Well, he's somebody I've saved for today, last day. His father was the younger brother of Edward IV. Remember Edward IV? It could be on the final. Okay, so remember Edward IV is the last, is really the first of the Yorkist monarchs. And you say, I love all my family. I'm very fraternal, brothers, sisters. But sometimes brothers can be troubling. And for Edward IV, his brother George was a lot of trouble. Now remember, we love Richard, the future Richard III. You haven't forgotten that in 7 days, I trust. So we're crazy about Dickie, but not so much George. George, just a little slimy. So George will end up, how can I say this? I want it to be nice, but it isn't nice. I mean, he had to be done away with in the Tower. Now, I was talking to some of our friends here about wines, and we talk about how we love wine. How much do we love it, though?
Not as much as George.
Because in this way, George actually, according to the tale, he died in wine. Yeah, they dipped him in. And you say, I'd rather go in water. I don't know. This is sweet wine. This is sweet wine. I don't know if you like it dry or middle. I know. Think about it. Mum. And that's George. You say, would your big brother do that to you? Well, he did. So the story goes, because he was, of course, troubled. Now, what can we say about this little fellow? Well, as you know, cute little people tend to grow up. I know, bummer. And I guess Edward IV couldn't take a chance. So he says, I love you so much. I know you do, Uncle Eddie, and I appreciate you so much. Get it, Uncle Eddie? And so Edward Plantagenet is put in the Tower of London, age 10, 5th grade, people. And I guess he had lessons, arts and crafts. He grew up, with the other prisoners. And I guess they had hobbies or, I don't know, crafts. And so he basically hung out there. Maybe he gave lessons to the commoners, commoners who were prisoners. I don't know. But he had a lot of time. In fact, he had till 1499. Because you say, is there going to be any parole, or will I come up for pardon, or, all of that sort of thing? I think on the Crime Channel or something. I think he's pretty well stuck. And you say, but what about Auntie Liz? Would she be concerned? You say, I wonder who is Auntie Liz? The Queen? Yeah. You think she says, please, honey, can't you do this for our anniversary? No. I mean, these people play rough, right? So he stays there, and we will find out that as long as he is, and we like to do it, breathe in that oxygen. As I say, they're cute when they're little, but then they grow up, and he could say, I'm a full-blooded Yorkist, and you are not. So, coup d'etat. I mean, not to be paranoid, but I think Henry VII had a lot of that on his mind. And I think this is so important because we're going to get to that Anglo-Spanish relationship. And when you're the new monarch on the block, and, people, I mean, our government recognizes all kinds of folks who take over governments and all that because it's kind of have to. And that's the same way, I'm sure, they did in the Middle Ages, the same thing about representation. But aren't you wondering, after they leave the reception, you're thinking, I wonder if those upstart Tudors are going to be around very long. I mean, you wouldn't say that. You would whisper it, to other people. Spanish, Aragonese, Castilians, whoever. And you'd say, well, that would hurt your feelings. Well, I hope they don't. I don't think they would do it too loudly, but that's something consideration we have to think about with Tudors is it looks good.
Do we know where the name Tudor came from? Or are you going to get to that? Or
Tudor. It's just a family name.
I haven't seen anybody with that last name yet. Did they marry somebody? I mean,
how did they get the name? Yeah, it was Welsh. That was from, because remember
who
that
had the last name? It was like
we
had the Warwicks, we had the
I'm sorry. You mean the Earl of Warwick, or how do you? And notice the Plantagenet. I thought that was kind of interesting. I guess there's so many Edwards.
Yeah.
They finally.
Was he ever given a number like all these other?
Oh, no, he didn't have a number. He was just a nice little earl. And even then he was earl in uniform and not the kind you want to be wearing. Yeah, you know what kind. Tower of London, T of L, number. Yeah, but Tudor, that's definitely from the Welsh background. Then there comes this amazing, I think I might have passed one. No, that's the first. And this is a group of people that utterly fascinate me. And I bet they do you. They're people who pretend to be someone else. And they get away with it for a long time. Or maybe some last through their lives. It's like, I know you thought I was gone. We all did. Yeah, we were horrified. We were so saddened, but we were so glad you're back. And you think, how do people pull this off? I don't know. You see these shows, series about people who are able to do this. But apparently, because of the two boys who went missing, and you know what two I mentioned. This will be on the phone. Starting with Edward V and little brother, little Richard. And remember, they passed away from illness or foul play. But whatever the case, some of these Yorkists boy, and now I'm going to call them co-conspirators. They're up to this idea of why couldn't we have somebody come back, as it were? And you're thinking that Henry VII needs to be vigilant. I think he does. Because I'm sure people are the same way today, but there were lots of people back then who were not, how you say, well informed. Shall we say they believe anything you told them. Rumor has it the York is coming back. So all of that leads us to the story of Lambert Simnel, as he was known. And he was a nice little fella. And I don't know, you'd love to know who was it who found him. I mean, it's like, it's sort of like discovering someone. It's like America, what is it? American Idol? What are those? What?
America's Most Wanted.
No. You want someone who has talent because you got to be imitative and you got to learn to speak correct English and do all that. So maybe take some Latin. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'm fantasizing, but whatever, I would think you would have to have a lot of instruction in order to pass muster. So Lambert Simnel was basically recruited, and I'm sure his family had no problems with that. I mean, we're gonna pay you and give you a good life. Who knows, you might even get a bath out of this. Yeah. Which would be a little difficult on the skin, I suspect, but very nice. So he apparently was sufficiently trained that some people thought he was, in fact, the long lost Edward. How they pull this off is a remarkable story to me. And so much so that, according to the accounts I've read, Henry VII actually brought our Plantagenet fellow out of the Tower of London and took him through London. And he would go out and wave to everybody. You could see him in one of those old 1950s limos. And the idea was to say, no, I'm alive, I'm here. The other is a fake. I don't know how willing Edward Plantagenet was, but I don't think he had a lot of choice. So Lambert was obviously discovered to be a fake. And you think, well, I guess I know. And you think, doesn't that irritate Henry? He does. And I think it's very interesting he didn't chop his head off. Isn't that nice? I know. I mean, but we love mercy, kindness. And he didn't give him a big hug, I can say that. But guess what he did? He didn't go to the Tower of London. And you go, oh, I know. Instead, he went to the kitchen. Now, a lot of you love kitchens. I get that. I'm very happy for you. But this was not like you, some great kitchen artist about recipes or Julia Child or that kind of thing. I think he was like scullery, probably wash dishes and chop vegetables. Nothing on your level of cuisine preparation, okay? But I just want you to understand he got to breathe every day. And I love that part of my day is breathing. It's a real good activity. And apparently you spent so many years doing kitchen duty, and then he was released. Isn't that wild? He had a wife, he got married. So there's a life. Is there a morning after? I mean, don't worry, I won't say it, but yeah, basically, you will understand that this was, in a way, a happy story. I mean, and you think about kitchen work. I mean, we all do it, so there's no shame in it, and it's certainly better than getting stuck in the Tower of London. Yeah, because that could be. Oh, so that's Lambert. And again, all the stories about him indicate that he did have some sort of life afterward, and free Latin classes, probably. I mean, and that's, I know, and most of us would have to pay for that. Yeah, high tuition bill. So Lambert came out very well, particularly with the head on the body. You know, that's always nice. But not so Perkin Warbeck. Perkin Warbeck was actually not even English, not even Welsh. He was, in fact, Flemish, for goodness sakes. And I guess he was discovered by, what would you call them, talent agents? People who basically are looking for someone to imitate the long lost Yorkist. It's amazing to me. I don't know whether he was just that good little con artist or what. But they got a hold of him, and this is like something out of P.T. Barnum, doesn't it? I mean, it's like you find somebody and say, I can make you a star. And what does this kid know? He gets over to, I guess, Ireland. I'm not saying this is a precursor to the Irish Rebellion or anything of that sort, because it's a little too early, I think you would agree. No. But there are discontented people who may have been supporters of the Yorkists. Whatever, this Perkin Warbeck actually received major training. And can you imagine, he was not even English. Could you imagine the linguistic issues and all the rest of it? And guess who's footing the bill? Now, I know you'll remember your trees. I know, Yorkist trees. It's good you have this mental capacity. Yeah. It's very, very helpful at a time like this. Margaret was the younger sister of Edward IV. So, Margaret, we call her Burgundy because she was married into the Burgundians. Burgundians don't like the French. And in this case, they don't like the Tudors because they eliminated her brother. Well, not Edward IV, he was already dead. Remember, he partied too much, died at 40. Remember that? Yeah, of course you do. Richard III. So Margaret meets this fella. Isn't it amazing? They took him over to the Burgundy. And she was now the Duchess. And she'd never seen her own nephew. Because these people, after they get married and settle down in their particular territories, it's not like they're going to run home like some of us would do, like want to go see everybody in the family, so make a quick trip across the channel, hang out with some of my York folks. No, I mean, when you are a woman of this order, you're going. And unless it's just happenstance, like going through, stop by and say, that's it. So she never met her nephew. So he was claiming to be the younger son who had been in the tower. I guess by this point, they've proven that Edward V was dead. Remember Edward V now? Young king, not really ever, but he gets a number. But what about his little brother? Oh no, he didn't die. He's alive and well. Yeah. And you know, people believe a lot that they're told. And you don't go in these crowds and go like skeptical or say, no, I don't think the evidence points that way. That's not the way crowds operate, in my opinion. But Perkin must have put on a good performance. He took good English classes, and he was had great tutors. One of whom was a Catholic priest, who must have been not very enthusiastic about the Tudors, let us say. So Perkin went through all the things, and he said, I am the younger son of Edward IV, and I survived. And now, you know what? The throne is mine. And they say, oh, and you're so cute and nice, and we want you to be the king. So that's the way he came into the picture. So old Perkin ended up as an instrument of these dissonant groups. But you can imagine that Henry VII is not going to give up his throne for that. So basically what he did, of course, at great expense in his defense budget. Yeah, because they might not have had the Pentagon, but they had plenty of expenses. I mean, for goodness sake, we just got on the throne. Think how much that cost, the Wars of the Roses? Not to mention the cleanup operations after the 100 Years' War. But enough about military costs. Let's just say we got to get this little fella out of the way. And at great expense, they eliminated the forces. Not that Perkin Warbeck was operating the forces, he was just the front and doing the routines, going out. It's almost like somebody going to doing performances, you know, like in Barnum and Bailey. But he was captured, and off you know, to you know where, the T of L. Yep. Welcome to our facility. And we have somebody we would like for you to meet. And you know who he is. He is real nobility, real royalty. He's a growing boy. And he, of course, is the descendant of George Plantagenet, the Earl of Warwick. According to the story, I don't know whether they were, would you call them roommates in a prison? I don't know. But they became buddies. I don't want it to be like one of these prison sagas out of something disturbing or unpleasant. But because I mean,
Cellmates.
Yeah.
Cellmates. I would think maybe they were in a suite because I don't think. I have dreams. What can I say? But anyway, according to the story, I don't know whether it was Perkin or whether it was actually George Plantagenet, got the idea of, what do they say? I need to see more crime movies. What do you say if you're trying to make an escape from the big house? Sound like Humphrey Bogart, don't it? But they tried to make an escape. I'm sure all the guards are going, y'all have a good trip. Maybe you'd be more comfortable in Glasgow or Dublin. I don't know where you want to go, but we wish you Godspeed. No, I don't think they made it too far. But that's how the end came for both of them. Chop, chop. And that would be, as you see, in 1499. So he didn't get to work in the kitchen. No potato peeling for you. And that, of course, allowed, I hate to say it this way, but it's true. This allowed the king to get rid of this Yorkist. Did his wife say anything to him and say, honey, I wish you didn't have to do this. You know, he's a nice young man. And then he points out to Liz, baby, we've got some important things going on. And you need to be thinking about that as I am. Because something down in Iberia is coming our way. And we want to focus on that. And to have any young male Yorkist is really unacceptable. So he needs to go. And so that's 1499. And of course, we understand this is all going to have as a purpose the elimination of this last Yorkist, or the last who is probable to be king. So Margaret of Burgundy threw away a fair amount of money for nothing. I mean, it gave Henry time, that is Henry VII, time to think about his future, because this was more than annoying, as I think you can understand. But it was expensive to get rid of all this and to deal with these dissident elements, because they did not support the Tudors. In other words, Shakespeare in the drama, you know, we always think they're all coming together and the roses and all of that. There are still people out there, as long as somebody's breathing, who could claim to be a Yorkist. You've got potential danger. So we understand the Tudor issue, and the Tudor issue is, of course, how do you keep your throne? Well, of course, there they are, the happy couple. And I assume there were many times she had to probably not say, gosh, I wish you wouldn't kill so many of my family. I know that there were a lot of them, weren't there? Yeah. Maybe she just accepted that as part of her particular role. But as I tell you, as hard as I tried, I couldn't find a mistress. I couldn't find anybody. And I thought, this is just wonderful marital devotion. Yeah, this is what you would like to think about. But a lot of Yorkist relatives, particularly of the male variety, were eliminated during this period. And of course, if they counted maybe on Auntie Liz helping them out, they were out of luck. She had definitely thrown in her lot with that of her husband, which is understandable, I guess, in the context. Oh, yes. Okay. Does this look familiar? Of course it does. You know it so well. And you can treasure this and think about it through the new year, okay? And when you come back, you'll be ready to be quizzed on it. Because in the words of a group that were called Carpenters, now that was before your time, Richard and Karen Carpenter. And they were popular in a song that we used to like. It's called We've Only Just Begun. Now it deals with love, but not for me. What it deals for me is genealogical knowledge. Yeah, I know that was not good, but the fact is, we've done some of this, but we've got more digging to do. Yeah. So with true grit, we will pursue, because there's Big Henry, Henry VII. So we're not ready for Henry VIII. That's 2026. That's next year. So you'll have to exercise self-control. I know, because understand there are other children. There's not just Henry VIII. And we've got to consider those other children. And you see them, there's Arthur, there's Margaret, and there's Mary. The 4 children. If there were other children, I wouldn't be surprised, because we all know about infant mortality and this period, and of course, the tendency to have as many children as possible. But however that may be, these are the 4 surviving children. And as far as I know, they were very loved and very well regarded by both parents. Now, Henry VII, I think we've all gotten the concern about forgiving the one and allowing him to work in the kitchen and then chopping off the head of the other. I would say in general that he was not averse to the use of capital punishment. And he was also possessed a quality that I'm sure we would never want anyone to have. He possessed one of the terrible vices. And I've been told that there are still people in the world today who have avarice. He loves money, the filth of lucre. I'm not here to preach, but I'm just saying, what was it they used to tell me when I was born? You can't take it with you. I heard that over and over again. And I'm sure it's true. But Henry really loved it. Maybe that's why he didn't have any mistresses. This was really, I mean, this was so titillating. He kept thinking about 21 different ways to get more money. You know, it was always, and I realized when you're king, you have to be interested in fundraising and projects, and that was what he did. He tried to increase the number of nobles. You say, oh, how nice. Well, what do you do when you become a noble? You have to pay an entrance fee. Have you ever heard of nickel and diamond people? Yeah. Sometimes people feel that how many different charges they can come up with for taxes. Have you thought about that? I try not to. But I want to be positive and loving about government. But yes, they find new ways. And of course, you understand, better than a fundraiser. Because you have to pay taxes, right? Or else into, yeah, the slammer for you. all of this is to say then, he creates new nobles. And why would you create new nobles? Well, we're running short. And why are you running short? Well, you check out the obituary pages for the Wars of the Roses. I mean, they got cleaned out. It wasn't like it was so bad on the lower classes. They weren't out there. I mean, they just died from regular things, starvation or hard work and all of that, disease. I mean, yeah, not very glamorous. But lots of these nobles, or maybe you picked the wrong side, like Yorkists. I know. You have your odds. Don't people gamble?
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, there are a lot of vacancies in the nobility. And so these people who are knights and so forth, I'm not saying everybody wants to be, but sometimes the king sort of pressures them into it. And again, it's all about money. But then once they get in the nobility, they can't get enough because you get to go to the right clubs and you don't have to wait till the second shift. You get in first and you don't hear the people saying, they just got it. They're not that important. No, so you don't get your feelings hurt. So then the Court of Star Chamber. If you've never heard of the Court of Star Chamber, sometimes in journalistic accounts, you'll hear people, they don't like a court's decision. They're mad about some judge. And then I always wonder how many people know enough English history that reference means anything to. Maybe I'm underestimating the historical literacy of the public. Yeah, maybe I'm not. But anyway, the Court of Star Chamber was begun by Henry VII. And basically what it does, it reminded me sort of like our HBO or Showtime movies, the grand jury. And you go in and they just examine you. And you can't have your attorney with you and you just answer the questions. You say, is that fair? I don't think that too important to the king at that stage. If you are brought before the Court of Star Chamber, and that's represented by the ceiling, that's why it's called the Star Chamber. I would say your chances are not good. Okay, I would give you it's not like Judge Wapner and People's Court. Yeah, it's not like that. I think, and this wouldn't be like, oh, well, you got your plow on this other fellow's land. It's nothing like that. These are high stakes people. Okay, so it could be a very serious matter. But whatever the case, where's it in fines? And where's it in confiscations? Yeah. So that means people who go before the Star Chamber are probably not going to make it. And out of that, the royal government will benefit from those unfortunate incidents. The idea of coerce is royal authority and, of course, revenues. So this would be very important in the Tudor period. It's simply to note it that at this early stage, I don't think he was going out necessarily for so much a popularity contest as he was for authority and control, and to make the Tudors more established. And when we think about what the English had been through with both Lancastrians and Yorkists, a century of this one comes and this one goes. So I think he wants as much authority as he can get. But part of it, of course, is the love of money. And part of it, of course, is you want to get that respect. You want to have that authority. And how do you do it? You make new friends, preferably the rich kind. And who's real rich? Well, you know who. Y'all know that from American history. Christopher Columbus. And we know about Spain's early involvement in the New World, so-called. And the fact, the English are going to get there too in their time. For us, it'll be in 2026, however. Yeah. So remember that. Be back. The idea, though, is that France is, of course, a Tudor enemy. Wouldn't you say that's a given? It's like Lancastrians and Yorkists. Everybody can get together and say, we all hate France. We marry them sometime, we ally sometime with them, but basically we hate them. So more or less, we're looking for ways to do something about the French. And so interestingly, by the late 15th century, the Spanish, who have come together, united, made discoveries in the New World, which led to the acquisition of vast wealth. Henry VII, wealth, gold. And you always got to like kismet. I think it could be love. And why? Well, the Spanish and the French are not friends. Why should they be? Well, why shouldn't they be? But that's just the way, possibly because of enmity over territories in southern France and northern Spain. But understand, of course, the Spanish are in a position that they have not been before because of the unification by marriage, as we all learned in American history, of Castile and Aragon by the marriage of Ferdinand and Isabel, one of the most significant marriages, particularly if you're a Muslim, right? And other dissident groups. However, if you are of the Tudor crowd, it could be a wonderful chance for you. You say, is this love? Is it all about love? Is it all about Anglo-Spanish amore? I'm not so sure about that. But I think we want that gold and we want it bad. It's called DOWRY. And guess what? We've got the perfect candidate. And as you know, Catherine of Aragon is how she is known to history. And she, of course, is, shall we say, utilized by her parents for the purpose of developing an Anglo-Spanish relationship. But wait, not so fast. This is not going to be a matter of a couple of dates. And then suddenly somebody's going to say, here's another old song. It was called I Think I Love You. Yeah. It's not like that at all. Okay. This is all about, you guessed it, the filth of lucre. And I got the son, you got the daughter. Let's make something beautiful over what well, we used to call it cash money, but let's just call it, we want bonds. We would like it in all kinds of denominations. Yeah. So it's very interesting because it was quite a negotiation that the English had way down south in Spain. But before we get to that, let's notice the enormity of the territory which we are concerned, and the unification by marriage of all of that land. Could you imagine? And of course, their Catholic majesties, Ferdinand and Isabella. And this will be a very, very important consideration. It'd be interesting to go into Spanish history and the ending of the Muslims' residence in these various parts. But let us just note that the discoveries of the Americas and the importation of all this wealth is very, very important. And Ferdinand and Isabella were willing to, if the price was right, willing to associate themselves with Henry if they felt, which I say the Tudors are here to stay, as opposed to here today and gone tomorrow. Because you realize how short a time the Yorkists were in authority in England? Not long. So, and I'm sure Ferdinand and Isabella, when they were thinking about what are we going to do with Catherine, our daughter, are thinking about recent history, recent English history. Oh, yeah. I mean, there were others out there. You know, you don't want history to be oversimplified. They were all knocking on the doors, thinking about we could have a good offering on your daughter. So there was a lot of talking about who was going to get her. But the English were very, very concerned. That, of course, is a supposed impression of the king and queen together. And, of course, now united by marriage with their lands, Castile and Aragon, into what will become Spain. That marriage, of course, is going to be by Henry's elder son. I suppose he was 17 or 18, named after you know who, everybody's favorite English figure, Arthur. And you say, I wonder where he got that name. I think you know. And of course, Catherine, the younger of two daughters. The significance of Catherine is going to have a lot to do with, of course, you know what, which we'll talk about in 2026. So you'll need to come back because I'm not talking. But this family, which had just the two daughters, is going to be significant for another reason. And I thought this was such an interesting figure. And those of you who know Spanish will notice above that, this is obviously a manuscript. This is in medieval Spanish. And you see Los Altos, Reyes. You can tell the letters. Yeah, see. So you linguists and people interested in paleography and linguistics and so forth, you could work on this and understand how very significant it is, because of course here you have the older daughter who is important in her own right. And I had to bring her in, even though her role in English history is limited, but she was, big sister. And she's known, perhaps unfairly, as Joanna the Mad, Juana la Loca. People have often debated this, whether she was really mentally challenged, but she was the older sister, and therefore, of course, she had greater significance. Because if you wondered why she, between Ferdinand and Isabel, it's because she's going to be ruler after them. And therefore, she gets this prime position. She was married to a lesser known figure, which has greater importance than it would seem. By the way, he's known as Philip the Handsome. He was Burgundian. Seems like we get so many Burgundians. And that particular line will end up producing Holy Roman emperors. But that's for the future. For right now, it's simply to note that this is the way the Spanish throne will go. It will go, in other words, from Ferdinand and Isabella to Juana and the family she has by Philip the Handsome. All of this is to say that Joanna, loved Philip a lot, and I don't know whether he reciprocated, but they were definitely man and wife, because she had a very famous son that you will know, I hope you know, and you will know a lot more about him in 2026. Yeah. Charles V.
Wow,
I know. You get excited just hearing the panting. I'm with you. Because, of course, he will have to confront Martin Luther. Is that titillating? Yeah. I start bringing this stuff up and I see the excitement. I know. I'm the same way. So you see now how significant that can be in terms of the larger picture of Juana. And I guess she and Catherine had correspondence or whatever. After Catherine leaves Aragon and goes to England for the rest of her life. But all of this is to say that Juana had a hard life. And between her husband and eventually her son, she was basically eliminated from authority and basically confined, I would say. Now, you may have seen a painting, I think it's in the Prado. It's a painting, and this is really gruesome. After her husband died, she started like almost worshiping at his gravesite. So that's not pleasant. And perhaps that would indicate that her mental faculties were gone. But anyway, it's not necessarily a happy story about Joanna. But I'm sorry, if she was sending letters to her sister and say, "Dear sis, sometimes I really wonder about my husband and kids." And she said, "You think you got problems? Let me tell you, sis, I've got worse." I know, people always think their problems are more than yours. Yeah, that can be. Yeah. So that's Joanna. So poor Ferdinand and Isabella, they got a lot of troubles, didn't they? Meanwhile, let's consider the other family members. You say, wow, this is a before picture. You are very right about that. We all look good then, because he was about 17, 16, young. He wrote poems. music. He was just charming, Renaissance humanist. I mean, you say, you mean, yes, I do. The future Henry VIII. Because he was looking forward, well, not forward, but he was looking towards a career in the church. You say, but didn't he have an appetite for the flesh? Well, yeah, I mean, sometimes the clergy make boo-boos, and I don't know whether this was planned, but the royal plan for his father was to make him Archbishop of Canterbury. And you say, oh, well, that's a nice job. Yeah. Pope, King, Archbishop. So in Henry VII's mind, I think this was the way: I'll have one boy, little Arthur, king, and then I'll have the younger boy as Archbishop. It's just going to be a veritable Tudor utopia. We'll be all so happy. Well, they will. So that was the way that it was supposed to work. And as we all know, it didn't work out that way. But this is the young Henry. And as far as I know, there is no sibling rivalry. Never hear about it. He knew his place, because we're thinking he was probably, 15, 16 at this point. So when they say, you're going to be Archbishop of Canterbury, oh, Dad, well, I work my way up. Well, I start off as parish priest. No, I think that's not the way it's going to be. So now let's go to the daughters, because they play a very important role. Margaret. Where is Margaret going? Well, I'll tell you exactly. She's going up north. She's going to Scotland, and she will play a very important role. And see, this was just to tantalize you. Her influence in later Tudor Stuart history will get you, you to be excited through the holidays and think he's going to have to spill the beans about the significance of Margaret. And you bet there will be plenty to tell you about, because, of course, I'll just say this. I can't control myself. I lack that. Her granddaughter is one of the most famous women in Scottish history. I know. Can you hold your breath till January of 26? I don't know. But I can't be bribed. No, no turkey, no pumpkin pie, nothing. So that's Margaret marrying James IV. And then there's young Mary. Oh, I know she's real cute. Now here's something ugly. Well, at least it's ugly to me. I wish it weren't. She's in love with the man next to her. His name, and again, they will be significant. Charles Brandon, the Duke of Suffolk. I mean, they were like childhood sweethearts. And then her father and mother are going to call her in. Mary, we've got some news for you, special news. Somebody is really excited about you and thinks you are really cute. Oh, Daddy, oh, Mommy. I can't wait. Well, do you want to know his name, Precious? He's the King of France. Oh, she says. He was 30, count them, 30 years older. This was, nothing wrong with older folks. Yeah, I stand up for my people. But I'm just saying that when you're 16 or 17, this is not your idea of fantasy land. So, he'd been married twice. I don't believe he had any children. So I think I know, not pleasant to think about, that he could have children by Mary. Luckily for Mary, that match did not result in any children. So, you know what happens? Your 30-year-old older husband dies, and you have no children, and guess what you do? The next boat back home. And that is not a bad thing, because now she married her boyfriend. It was very romantic when you think about it, because I think more or less they had planned maybe to marry her to some other king and so forth, but I guess now that she would be able to get married to the person she loved, that's the way it worked. And they had a long and successful marriage, and they had a granddaughter that, should you be on a quiz show, I want you to get it right, or call me, phone a friend, I'm your friend, the 9-day queen. And you say, is that going to be on the phone? No, not this time, but in 2026 it will be. But that's how that is connected. And I can see your mind is just pouring into, you want to have a tree of your own. And I like that. You have your tree and you can get all these people in. It will be a wild tree because you need some pruning, but because it's got a lot of limbs. Arthur and Catherine would be married according to the negotiations, and it became a marriage of youth, and they paid a substantial dowry to bring about the union of Catherine and Arthur. They were both, they were young, according to the stories, in love, and both highly educated and so forth. I mean, I'm sure she had to take English lessons, and gosh, it's good for Latin, isn't it? Because of course they knew their Latin well. And why? Because they were well educated. So it was quite romantic, so they said. And then they both came into something called sleeping sickness. And boy, did I have to look that one up. It was sometimes called the sweating sickness. Sleeping sickness of today is largely found in Africa, I'm told. But in this case, and it had a short life, he would have various symptoms, of course, sleeping in addition to other unpleasant symptoms led either to recovery or death. In Arthur's case, death. In Catherine's case, survival. And they were both very young, having nothing to do with your, how do you take care of yourself? I mean, they were young. There's no reason why both of them would have this and at the same time, although obviously they lived together. but it had nothing to do, as you might think, infectious diseases. Because at first, when I tried to, sort of pick up on my medical history, they were trying to tell me about a disease now in Africa, but it has nothing to do with it. This was purely 16th century. They have little explanation for it, except that some cases like this of Arthur were fatal. But we've said before that none of us would want to live in this period in terms of all the conditions. I mean, it's good to get to live a long time. So anyway, Arthur dies a very young man. And the grief of his parents must have been incredible. Not just the money, but of course, the oldest child. And in Canterbury, I actually found out, because I saw it, what they call a mantry, a place where the priest could offer prayers and services for Arthur's soul, that was put there by his father and mother. You establish them, these are like endowments, and you establish them. And I thought about, I cannot imagine that level of grief. I mean, I think we get it, but it was very, very serious that they had lost this young man, and it was fast. Catherine is recovering, and I guess she's already thinking about when will I be going home. Because clearly, again, her husband wasn't the king. And even if he were, we didn't have any children. This, of course, is a famous stained glass that was dedicated to him. And you just don't think about these things until you realize how very young they were. But they were young indeed, and that was called sleeping sickness. And she recovered. They were both had it. That's what's so interesting, that it's far from being anything like the Black Death or something like that, where, you see just masses of people dying.
Probably typhoid.
Very well, yeah. Yeah, that's one of the possibilities of typhoid, which was very common, I guess. Mhm.
Yep.
Very bad. So, what do you do now? Because, of course, grief is very powerful, but also, yeah, the dowry. Because those darn refunds. Yeah, I know you say, yeah, but do I have to give it back? Well, yeah. I mean, if she comes back, then we want cash payment. I mean, it's like, I don't know if you have to pay interest and all that, but more or less, this will be very ticklish for King Henry VII. And he will say, yeah, I mean, I'm really, really sorry about this whole thing. I know, but we just all love Catherine so very much. Unsaid is the fact, what else do they love? Hard gold cash. Yeah, lots of it. CC, as we say in Madrid. So, what do we do about that? Well, we have another son. He was going to be Archbishop of Canterbury, but he's decided celibacy is not all that was cracked up to be. So, he loves the church, though. Go Big C. Yeah. So, with that understood, then let's just let some time go past, and Catherine's a widow or sort of a widow, and she can keep working, taking English 101, 201, advanced English, and writing poems, doing embroidery. I don't know, doing a lot of things. And then when our boy Henry grows up, then the wedding march. So that is the idea. It will take some years for this remarriage. They have papal authorization for it because she had attested to the fact that it was not a genuine marriage. It was simply they were going through the motions, but they weren't man and wife, so to speak. So that papal dispensation meant that, in fact, Catherine remained in England, taking English lessons, and I guess she was hanging out with a younger Henry, because he was younger. And I know that doesn't seem important now, but it must have been to people back then. But he was growing up and saying, "Oh, I thought you were going to be my sis. And now, gosh, I guess I'm going to give you a big ring." So, yeah, it's all a bit strange. But that is what will happen. And as a result of that, we will have the marriage of Henry and Catherine. Meanwhile, Elizabeth and Henry did not live to see it. She died in 1503. Not to be romantic about it, but she took the death of Arthur very badly, as they both did. So she died a few months later. But again, I'm not saying that's related. I'm just saying health issues. Yeah. But I mean, at the vast age of 50 or something. I mean, for us, 50 nothing. But the idea was that 1503 was bad, and then Henry thought about remarriage. That is Henry VII. But I guess at that stage, he decided not to remarry. He died in 1509. And of course, Henry, that all of us know so well, will then become king, and he will have a new queen, Catherine of Aragon, thanks to papal authorization. And of course, he will also have that original endowment that was given, of course, for Arthur and Catherine, but now Catherine and Henry. They had a splendid coronation. Believe it or not, it was presided over in grand fashion. By this point, both parents were gone, both Henry and Henry VII and Elizabeth. But presiding over that, and she died a few days later, Henry VII's mother. And you're going to get very excited. Oh, so excited when I remind you of her name. And among your New Year's resolutions, you will need to learn this family tree, because you won't need me to tell you what her name was. Let's just put it this way. She was a Beaufort. And have you heard of Beauforts?
Oh.
Indeed, you have. Beauforts have been all over this place. Yeah, since September. You can't get enough Beauforts. So she was the grand dame of the whole thing, of this coronation. I just found that fascinating because remember, she was Henry VII's mother. But she was still kicking for a week or two and got to preside over this enormous coronation. And you say, if they only knew what would happen in the future. Sometimes it's best not to know. Let's face it. Thank you all so much. I've really enjoyed this term. I appreciate y'all coming. Please come back in 2026. Okay, if you will.
God willing.
Are you would you mind?